address this, but I think it's, or Monica, it's not unreasonable to predict that over time, other communities are going to be moving to RO as well, and at that point, we'll be very comparable.
Well, I can tell you, we've done a lot of studies for the water management districts, and when you look at the alternative water that's gonna be necessary around the state, it's tremendous,
Yeah.
it's tremendously expensive. And the only reason that a lot of communities haven't incurred that already is because in 2008, when we had the collapse of the housing markets and the financial markets in our country, growth went in the tank, usage went down, and so our future, in terms of the need for that additional water, just
Got
moved out
pushed
a
out.
little bit.
But it's
coming.
Yeah.
It's coming. And it's beginning to get moved back up as we see recovery, and hopefully we'll see more recovery.
So that's encouraging that,
Well-
you know, we're ahead of the curve in terms of the technology, and
You are.
we're a little bit more expensive, but we're not way out of line with everybody
You're
else.
really in a good position because, as someone pointed out, you have a good bit of ability to absorb growth without increasing your fixed costs dramatically. You know, and you're in what I would think is really pretty good shape, particularly given where you compare the survey. And the other thing is, all of those communities are under the same pressures of that CPI water and sewage maintenance index. And so whether it happens next year or the year after that, they're all gonna be having to respond to those pressures over the next 5 to 10 years.
Mr. Zerdy? Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Burton. And, you know, I think you brought up a pretty good point there in the fact that there's a sense of anticipation that, oh, these are big rate increases that are happening here, but they're basically, what you've shown us is very helpful because it says it's pretty much average.
For the industry, it definitely is.
For the industry and competitively. Looking down the line of our neighbors, unless you know some of our neighbors and you've done their studies, you can't predict what extra bumps that they're going to have for either the quality of the water that they're pulling up, additional wells that they're going to do, RO plant, or even like some of our neighbor to the north, where they have actual water problems, can't get enough, and have to take it from somewhere else.
There's all kind of complexities in solving your water supply problems. You guys kind of bit the bullet with your RO, and you're in a pretty good position. One of our clients that's close to you is the city of Fort Lauderdale, and their policy is a 5% rate increase every year. And that's to keep up with that curve is what they're doing.
So that's just a little follow-up then. The anticipation that's happening here is such that we are in a competitive mode, but you know, the increase still gives us the ability to do some catch-up on some of our maintenance work had been not really done well lately. And it's not, I wouldn't put the quotation marks of a big increase, which there's a couple of comments out there saying this is a big.
I don't think, in my opinion, doing this for 30 years, these aren't big increases. You think about the basket of goods that we see in the regular CPI for a household and the basket of goods for utility. They're dramatically different. I mean, you have regulatory requirements, you have aging infrastructure, you have expensive alternative water supply, and you have, you know, your basket of goods is very different, it's much more expensive, and it's borne out for the last 30 years of records throughout the country. So I think you're in a pretty good position there.
Vice Mayor?
I was kind of waiting to go next to last.
Commissioner Marceau?
You're next. All right.
All right, I'll be next. 2 years ago, when we were looking at this, because I know we weren't talking the 2-inch water pipes, we weren't talking 2020. 2 years ago, we had no increases planned for the budget process that first year and no budget increases again the second year. But we did 2 years ago, you planned an increase in these numbers 2 years ago for this calendar year. Correct?
I believe that's true.
Okay, I was here, I remember.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't want them,
Mayor?
yeah,
Yeah,
I don't want this to be, because these two projects are in there, I wanna make sure that you know, that people understand that to keep the operation moving and forward, these increases were already planned, that they don't have to do with just those two.
Mayor, just as a comment, is that, if I might, is, as you're saying, is that there were 0% increases for 2 years, but then beyond that, starting in 2015, it was projected for a 5% increase per year following that for several years. So,
Correct.
we're essentially saying that we're going to be able to implement the capital plans that we've discussed and still be able to maintain that same 5% rate increase that was done or that was projected in previous years.
So just as much as I was so pleased to see your happy and smiley face, I remember 2 years ago that you said this was the calendar year that the increases were going to be necessary. So I wasn't as excited, I'm sorry.
Well, there's if I may, there's one thing that affects that to some extent also. 2 years ago, we were all reeling from the fall off of growth and everything, and we had relatively modest growth projections. You have significant growth in the pipeline right now that's going to happen. We're trying to take that into account, and that helps because that fuels your revenue stream. But then we tapered it off after what's in the pipeline back to very modest levels. If growth does really materialize in these outer years at greater levels than we projected, then everything gets better. Because a growth unit is a growth unit of revenue, $50, $60, whatever it is a month, how much a month, with very little marginal cost to serve them. So it really affects your revenue stream way more than it does your cost per unit when you get growth. And when you lost usage, it was the opposite. It affected your revenue negatively. So this 2008 phenomenon has been pretty dramatic for utilities all over the state. And you guys are really doing pretty well.
And just to clarify again, growth, when he says growth, we're talking about bringing customers back into the system,
Adding
adding
customers.
customers.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Vice Mayor, it's your turn.
Well, thank you, Mayor, thank you.
Save the best for last.
No, that's not true. No, thank you, Mayor, because you actually touched on, and Larry, thank you for reminding all of us where we came from a couple of years ago and where we are now. And I look at this as kind of like, almost like we're getting a little bit more than what we anticipated when we had that conversation a couple of years ago. So that's wonderful. The other thing that I thought was striking, if you go back to could you go back 2 or 3 slides to keep going, that one right there. If you look at our overall, this is water and sewer on 5,000 gallons.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's interesting that the neighbors that border us all have higher water and sewer rates. Lantana, Palm Springs, West Palm Beach. So we're very competitive in that sense.
With our neighbors.
In that sense. So that's encouraging as well. And I don't know if this is a Larry question or for you, Mr. Burton. What is our current debt in the water and sewer? Where are we at in debt?
That maybe is a Leticia question.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to leave you out.
That's okay.
She was slacking
She has the model here, and she can tell you what the existing debt service is, because we're concerned with annual cash flow. I don't know that she has in the model the actual outstanding principal amounts, but it's the annual debt service.
Right.
Right, so in your.
If you would put the microphone,
Oh, I'm sorry.
it's okay.
In your sewer, you don't have any debt. In the water fund, you only have, you have 2 state revolving loans. One was originally issued for $6.5 million, and the other one's $450,000. And I only have the debt payments, but.
And those revolve, the 6.5 million, that's on the RO plan, yes?
That was,
Yes.
that's the SRF.
Okay. All right, so we'll call it $7 million.
She's gonna tell you what the annual
Yeah.
principal interest payment.
Well, I guess the sum of all the payments I have here is 40.5, but that is the debt service through whenever's debt is done, which is 2032.
That's, look, can you look
That's
at
total.
an annual number,
An annual number, so for 2015, your debt payments would be 2.7, your debt service.
2.7.
2.7
Yeah,
million.
I just want to bring us back to that, because you mentioned that, relatively speaking, if we did go out and borrow more money than $14 million or whatever, we're still well below in that favorable tolerable.
Your ratios, when Standard & Poor's and Moody's and Fitch look at your rating, they will look at that and it won't even cause.
They won't even blame.
They like the liquidity, you got 4 months of O&M expense, that's good. And they like your debt service coverage, and your debt service coverage is really good throughout the whole period. Those are the things that they look at all kinds of things, your community and everything. But if you really get them, after dinner and ask them, what is it you're really looking at?
Sure.
They're really focused on those things. And those debt ratios are important to them too, and you would be right in there.
And Doug, thanks for coming in tonight. Doug, how are you? Thanks for coming back. I think this might be a question for you. One of the original slides up there, when you were presenting, dealt with the regional sewer, I guess the asset balance, I think is the line item I was looking at, that went from a $6.1 million asset balance in 2011, 2012, to a projected $22,000 hit, or negative balance, if you will, in fiscal 15. Could you speak to where the lion's share of that money went, or where some of those chunks of money may have gone? The use of that money, the fund balance?
Let me,
Settlements? Lawsuit settlements?
Commissioner, I believe most of that was in the legal settlements with the participants in our sub-regional sewer system. In excess of $4 million, I believe.
And also, one more final question, while we're talking about utility fund balances and whatnot. We borrowed several $1 million to put to the beach project. Did we ever figure out exactly what fund balance that came out of? And we know?
yeah,
It was out of the water and it was out of the insurance.
The water.
yeah, there was approximately $4 million.
3.8, I
Yeah,
think,
3.8 or
something
something.
like that, out of water.
And,
It's on that sheet.
yeah,
And I guess our next presentation will speak to how we're gonna get that money back, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
yeah, just the other thing I might mention, Mr. Commissioner, is, in regard to the regional, sewer fund, is, we did not address that as far as rates here tonight, but we had a meeting of the sub-regional, board essentially last week, and at that time, we projected a 14% increase in the regional wastewater fund, that is, basically necessary to balance that, increasing expense, over the next year, and that basically is due to the portion that ECR is charging us as a pass-through actually went up by 34%, and so that resulted in the charges that we're projecting to our customers of a 14% increase.
Thank you.
Commissioner Surtee?
On that ECR charges though, that's really something that ours went up, but everybody else around here also goes up, correct? So on a competitive basis, there's no difference between this rate goes up over here and it doesn't go up somewhere else, it's the same.
Yeah,
Rising sewer.
literally, it
flows
was the whole center part of Palm Beach County is seeing that increase.
Right, because, we're looking at a level of competitiveness to let people know, come here, because we're trying to give a level of service, and again, just having a secure supply of water is, to me, having lived down here for over 50 years in South Florida, that's of grave concern, so that should be a plus for us, right?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Letitia.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I know she's the brains of the operation.
Right.
Improved.